This time around, we're diving into Trent Hamm's The Simple Dollar. It's a book jam-packed with advice, personal stories, even exercises, really just trying to help us wrap our heads around money and work towards financial independence.
You know, it's really cool how Ham approaches this. He doesn't just preach from some, high horse. He actually takes you through his own journey with money. And like, he wasn't always this money whiz.
Ray even talks about how he got into debt, even with a steady job. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone can fall into those financial traps. But, Ham really emphasizes that first step is just acknowledging where you are financially.
Like admitting there's a problem in the first place.
Right. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. Self-awareness can be tough. But Ham's got a really compassionate approach.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, hey, we've all been there, let's figure this out together. Now let's get into one of the core themes in the book. Budgeting. Not always the most exciting topic, I know. But Hamm makes it engaging.
He does. Remember the 50-30-20 rule? The classic budgeting framework? Could be really helpful, especially if you're just getting started.
Oh yeah, refresh my memory. How does that break down again?
So basically, you want to shoot for 50% of your after-tax income, going to essential needs, things like housing, groceries, transportation, the essentials. Then 30% goes towards your wants, the fun stuff. And then the last 20%, that's for your savings and paying down any debt you might have.
So it's like you're dividing your money into buckets based on what's important. What I find really interesting is Hamm's emphasis on aligning your spending with your values. It's not just about the numbers, it's about making sure your money is working for you. And it feels like you're being true to yourself.
Absolutely. Ham's got this great quote in the book. He says, don't just trap your money, make your money track your values.
That's a good one.
Makes you think about what's actually important to you and whether how you're spending your money is actually supporting that or not.
It's like being the CEO of your own life, right? Making sure your resources are going where you want them to go. Speaking of conscious choices, Hamm also talks about frugality. Now, there's this misconception that frugality is about being a penny pincher, depriving yourself. But Hamm's perspective is so different.
It is totally different. He sees frugality as a path to freedom, making intentional choices about your money, so you have more control over your life, and you can actually focus on what matters to you.
He's got this really compelling example in the book about how he used to spend a ton of money eating out. And then he realized it wasn't really bringing him much joy. So he starts cooking more at home. And not only did he save money, but he actually discovered he loves to cook.
I love that story. It shows how frugality isn't about deprivation. It's about being mindful. And honestly, sometimes it can lead you to discover new things that you really enjoy.
Right. Okay, so we've got budgeting frugality as this foundation. But what about those bigger financial goals? Things like saving and investing, those can feel really daunting, especially if you don't have a lot of extra cash to throw around.
For sure. But Ham breaks those down. And it starts to feel a lot more achievable. He talks about how important it is to have an emergency fund, that financial cushion that can help you get through those unexpected situations.
Yeah, I've heard you're supposed to have 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved up. But I mean, that's a lot. It can be hard to know even where to start.
Totally. But Ham suggests just starting small and building it up gradually. Even if it's like $5 or $10 a week, it adds up over time. Just make it a habit.
Like paying yourself first?
Exactly.
What about investing? I'll be honest, that's an area I feel lost in. I know it's important for things like retirement, but it all seems so complicated.
A lot of people feel that way. But Ham does a really good job of explaining it, especially for beginners. He explained things like compound interest. That's where your money earns interest, and then that interest earns interest. It's like a snowball effect.
So the longer your money's invested, the more it can potentially grow?
Exactly.
That sounds like something Einstein would have come up with.
Well, Einstein actually called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. So maybe he did. But Ham doesn't just throw you into the stock market. He talks about retirement accounts like 401ks and IRAs.
Oh, so an IRA is a type of retirement account. I've always heard that term, but I've never really understood what it meant.
Yeah, they're accounts that are specifically made for retirement savings, and they come with tax advantages.
So Ham lays all this out in a way that's easy to understand, even if you're totally new to investing.
He does. And he really emphasizes starting early, even if you can only put in a little bit at a time.
Time is your friend when it comes to investing. Now, we can't talk about personal finance without talking about debt. It's just a reality for so many people. It can feel like this huge weight holding you back.
It can be really stressful, financially and emotionally. But Ham has some practical strategies for getting a handle on it. Have you ever heard of the debt snowball method?
That sounds familiar. Is that the one where you focus on paying off your smallest debts first?
Yep, that's the one. The idea is that by knocking out those smaller ones first, it gives you momentum and motivation. It's like those early wins give you the fuel to keep going.
That makes sense. It would definitely feel good to get a couple of quick wins under your belt. But what about the debt avalanche method? How's that different?
With the debt avalanche, you focus on paying down the debts with the highest interest rates first. That way you end up saving more money over time because you're minimizing the amount of interest you have to pay.
So it's more of a math-based approach. It's interesting how Ham gives you different strategies so people can kind of choose what works best for them and their situation.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to debt. The important thing is to have a plan and stick to it.
And it's interesting how he also talks about the emotional side of debt. It's not just about the numbers. It's about dealing with those feelings of shame or stress.
Totally. Ham encourages self-compassion. We're all human. We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them and keep moving forward.
Progress, not perfection. So we've talked about budgeting, frugality, saving, investing, debt. But one of the things that really stood out to me in The Simple Dollar was this idea of aligning your money with your life goals.
Absolutely. It's about more than just accumulating wealth. It's about using your money to create the life you actually want.
He has this exercise in the book. He asks you to imagine you've won the lottery, but instead of focusing on all the stuff you'd buy, he asks you to think about how you'd spend your time. What would your ideal day look like? What kind of impact would you want to make on the world?
Such a powerful exercise. It forces you to think about what really matters to you. And then you can start to ask yourself, how can your money help you achieve those things?
It's about connecting your finances with your values and your dreams, and Ham gives some tips on how to do that. Things like creating a vision board, writing a personal mission statement, or even just taking time to reflect on what makes you happy.
It's about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance. Instead of, I can't afford that, it becomes, how can I make this happen?
It's about taking control of your financial future, using your money as a tool to create a life that feels meaningful.
Exactly. And Ham reminds us that it doesn't have to be about deprivation or sacrifice. It's about making choices, choices that are in line with your values and that bring you a sense of peace, purpose, and fulfillment.
I love that. So we've laid the groundwork: budgeting frugality, aligning your money with your goals. But how do you actually make these changes stick? How do we turn these good intentions into habits? That's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive into The Simple Dollar.
We'll be back in a flash with more insights and practical tips from Trent Hamm.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into The Simple Dollar. We've been talking about Trent Hamm's approach to personal finance, really aligning your money with what matters to you, using it as a tool to build the life you want. But it's one thing to talk about these principles. How do we actually put them to practice? Where do we even begin?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But the good news is, Hamm doesn't just leave us hanging with these high-level ideas. He gives us a bunch of practical advice, actionable steps that we can actually take.
Okay, so let's get specific. What are some of the things that really stood out to you, like things that people can start doing today?
One of the most basic but important things Hamm talks about is tracking your spending. It might sound kind of boring, but it's amazing what you can learn just by seeing where your money's actually going.
Right, it's like what gets measured gets managed. You can't make good decisions about your money if you don't know where it's going.
Exactly. And luckily, there are so many ways to track your spending these days. You can use an app, a spreadsheet, even just a notebook.
Whatever works right. It's about finding a system you can stick with. And I like that Ham doesn't say you have to completely deprive yourself. It's more about making conscious choices.
It is. It's about finding those little areas where you can cut back without feeling like you're sacrificing. He actually has this great analogy in the book. He compares our spending habits to a leaky boat. You might have a tiny little leak and you don't even notice it at first, but over time, all those little leaks can add up.
And sink your ship.
Exactly.
It's about finding those leaks and plugging them.
Right. Identifying those areas where maybe you're just mindlessly spending money. And then you can take that money and redirect it towards something that's actually important to you.
Okay, so let's say you've started tracking your spending. You're finding those leaks. What's next?
Well, another big piece of the puzzle is tackling debt.
We talked about that a bit earlier, but it's such a big topic. It's worth going a little deeper. Debt can be so stressful for people.
It can. And that's often something people don't talk about. But it's something so many of us deal with.
Right.
And Hamm gets that He acknowledges the emotional side of it.
He does.
He talks about how it can feel like this huge burden weighing you down, preventing you from moving forward.
But he also gives some really good advice on how to break free. We talked about the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. What are some other key takeaways when it comes to debt?
The most important thing is to have a plan and to be committed to that plan. It's like running a marathon. You need to know where you're going and how you're going to get there.
Right, and just like with running, consistency is key.
Absolutely. Even those small, consistent efforts will eventually lead to big results.
And it's also important to celebrate the small wins along the way.
Right.
Totally.
Paying off a credit card, even if it's a small one, is a big deal. It's like a little reward for yourself.
Keeps you motivated.
Exactly.
One of the things I really appreciate about Hamm's approach is that he doesn't just focus on the nuts and bolts of personal finance. He also talks about the mindset stuff, the psychology of money.
He does. Our thoughts and beliefs about money play a huge role in our financial success.
They really do.
He has a whole chapter on overcoming mental barriers. Things like negative self-talk and limiting beliefs that can really sabotage us.
I think we've all had those thoughts, I'm not good with money, or I'll never be able to afford that.
Right. And Hamm challenges us to change that thinking.
He does.
He talks about how our thoughts create our reality. So if we want to change our financial situation, we have to start with our thoughts.
That's a big one. But how do we actually do that? How do we get rid of those negative thoughts and start believing in ourselves?
Well, Hamm suggests a few strategies. One is just to become more aware of those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And then when you notice them consciously, choose to replace them with more positive ones.
So it's like catching yourself in the act and then saying, wait a minute, that's not true. I am capable of managing my money. I can achieve my financial goals.
Exactly. It's like training your brain to focus on the good stuff. Another strategy is visualization. Imagining yourself living your ideal financial future.
Like creating a mental movie of your dream life.
Yep. The more you focus on that vision, the more likely you are to start making it a reality.
It's the law of attraction in action. We've talked a lot about individual action, but Hamm also talks about the importance of community and support.
He does. He says, you don't have to go it alone. There's strength in numbers, and there's wisdom in shared experience.
That's so true. It's easy to feel isolated when it comes to money.
It is. We all have our own struggles, and sometimes it feels like everyone else has it figured out.
But that's usually not the case.
Definitely not. Hamm reminds us that everyone's journey is different, and there's no shame in asking for help.
Or learning from people who've been there before.
Right. Surround yourself with people who support your goals.
Whether it's your partner, family, friends, even online communities.
And don't be afraid to be open about your challenges. Talking about it can actually help you stay accountable and motivated.
Like having a financial cheerleading squad.
Exactly.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to come back to this idea of aligning your spending with your values.
That's such a core part of Hamm's philosophy.
It's so easy to get caught up in consumerism.
It is. We're constantly being bombarded with messages telling us to buy more stuff.
Right, and it's easy to forget what actually matters.
Yeah, Hamm wants us to be more intentional.
He wants us to ask ourselves, does this purchase align with my values? Does it support the life I want to create?
It's a good question to ask.
He suggests doing a values check before you buy anything big. Ask yourself, what's really important to me? What brings me joy?
And if you're not sure, think about how you'd spend your time if money wasn't an issue.
What would you be doing? What kind of impact would you be making?
Once you've figured out your values, you can start making spending choices that reflect those values.
It might mean saying no to some things, even if you can afford them. But it also might mean saying yes to experiences that light you up.
It's about creating a life that feels authentic.
Both financially and personally.
Well said.
I think we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, but there's still more to explore. We'll be back in a jiffy to continue our journey through the simple dollar.
We'll have even more practical tips for taking control of your finances and building a brighter future.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the simple dollar. We've been really digging into Trent Hamm's take on personal finance. It's not just about the numbers, right? It's about making your money work for you and building a life that you actually love.
Exactly. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is how Hamm emphasizes that you don't have to do this alone.
Oh yeah, he talks about the importance of getting other people involved.
Yeah, especially when it comes to financial decisions.
You're talking about like talking to your partner about money.
Exactly. That could be a really tough conversation for some couples.
It can be, but Hamm makes a good point. Open communication is key when you're trying to build a strong financial foundation together.
He suggests even setting aside some regular time, maybe like once a month, to just check in with each other about your budget goals,
Yeah.
any challenges you're facing.
Like a money bait?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about couples. Ham also talks about teaching kids about money from a young age.
I think that's so important. Like you're giving them this head start. But how do you even begin to teach kids about money? It's such an abstract concept.
Right. But Ham has some good tips. For younger kids, it could be something as simple as an allowance. Let them make decisions about how they want to spend it or save it.
So they can start to understand how money works.
Exactly. And as they get older, you can involve them in more complex discussions. Maybe help them open a savings account or even start investing a little bit.
Wow. That's empowering them with knowledge and skills they can use for the rest of their lives.
Mhm.
Speaking of skills, there's one that Ham talks about that I think a lot of people forget, negotiating.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's not just for business deals.
Right.
We can actually negotiate in our everyday lives to save money or get a better deal.
I'll admit I'm not very good at negotiating. It feels kind of awkward.
I get that. But Ham says it's really just about advocating for yourself and making sure you're getting a fair price. He suggests starting small, like calling your cable company to see if they can lower your bill, or negotiating the price of a car repair.
So just getting comfortable asking.
Right. The worst they can say is no,
Sure.
and the more you do it, the easier it gets.
So we've talked about a lot of practical tips, but one of the things that really resonated with me in The Simple Dollar was Ham's focus on finding contentment.
Yeah, that's so important, especially nowadays when we're constantly being told we need more, more, more.
It's so easy to get caught up in that, but Ham encourages us to step back and ask ourselves what really makes us happy.
It's about shifting your focus away from material things
Yeah.
and towards experiences, relationships, personal growth.
I love that.
Ham has this great quote. He says, happiness isn't about having what you want. It's about wanting what you have.
Ooh, that's good.
It's about being grateful for what you already have.
And finding joy in the simple things.
Exactly.
When you're content, you're less likely to overspend or chase after things that don't really matter. It's about finding that balance, enjoying life, but also being responsible with your money.
Well said.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about budgeting, frugality, aligning your money with your values, and even finding contentment.
We have. Ham's book is a great resource if you're looking for some guidance on your financial journey.
It is. And remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about making progress, taking small steps, and celebrating your wins along the way.
Don't forget to reach out for support if you need it too. There's so many resources available. You don't have to do this alone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the simple dollar. We hope you learned some valuable insights, and we encourage you to take what you've learned and start applying it to your own life. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep living a life that's rich in every sense of the word.